Hi, this is your host, Laura Powers, and I'm so pleased today to have Khristee Rich on the show. She is a holistic healer and a writer, and we're here to talk about her work as well as many other things that I'm sure will come up in the conversation. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So I'd love for you to give a little bit about your background for those who aren't familiar with your work.
Okay, so my background's a pretty interesting background. I had a debilitating chronic illness myself for 15 years. So that's how I got into alternative health and wellness. So I was fresh out of college, and all of a sudden I was very, very sick and I didn't know how to get well. So did the traditional route. I went to all the best doctors. I went to my primary doctor that I went to from the time I was a child, and nobody could find anything wrong with me. So this was a long struggle for 15 years trying to overcome my chronic illness. I had been healthy all of my life, and suddenly I felt debilitated. I couldn't work, I couldn't socialize, I couldn't do anything. So to make a long story short, it wasn't until 15 years later that I found a doctor who was willing to do further testing. And because of that, he found out the root cause, the reason why I was sick. And so the reason was that I had really high levels of heavy metals in my blood.
Oh, yeah, that's awful. And I think that happens for a lot of people.
Yeah. And they never thought to test for it. I actually had been doing a lot of research. I was very proactive the whole time I was sick. And I did some research at one point, actually 2 years before my diagnosis. And I took it to my doctor and I said, I think I have heavy metals. I have all the symptoms. And he said, there's no way possible you could have heavy metals. And he was offended that I was diagnosing myself. But if he had listened, I would have been healthy 2 years earlier. But finally, I found another doctor, a specialist, who was willing to do further testing. He found out I had high levels of heavy metals off the charts, the highest he'd ever seen of both lead and mercury. And he suggested that I go right into chelation therapy. And I would have to go to a specialist, a toxicologist, because that wasn't his field. And so I'd have to have weekly chelation therapy in New York City. And I did research once I went home, and I found out that it was very costly. At the time, I didn't have any insurance. It was also very painful. I didn't do well with pain, still don't. And it was one of the few substances that can pass between the blood-brain barrier. So because of that, the outcome is that you can have worse symptoms. You can have disastrous consequences, such as paralysis and brain damage, and even death. So once I found this out, I'm like, no, thank you. I've been struggling with my health all this time. I don't want to risk dying over being cured. So basically I said, I'm a healer. At this point, I had been studying healing. I had been studying Reiki and also shamanism. That was one of the ways I was trying to improve my health while I was sick. So I just stumbled upon a Russian shaman in my area. It was,
As one does.
as one does when one needs to be healed, right? So I studied with him for several years. I learned shamanism, and then I learned Reiki soon after. So I had been working on myself with the healing. I had been seeing clients, but with heavy metals, you have to actually have something to draw the metals out. They don't just come out naturally over time, and they don't come out through energy work. So I said, okay, well, Khristee, you're a healer. You can heal yourself. So that's what I set out to do. I went on to Google and I did some research of food and supplements that I could take that were all natural, no side effects. And so I started to take them daily. I made smoothies with the supplement. I also had food every single day that was naturally chelating. And I just told myself that I would be well in 1 month. I gave myself a deadline. So I just kept very, very positive. And every single day I said, Khristee, you're going to be well in 1 month, and eat this food, drink this drink. And I started meditating for the first time ever. So I meditated twice a day for 20 minutes a day. And that really helped to clear my mind and really to deepen my breath. And I really believe that was one of the reasons why I got well. I never studied meditation before, and it's powerful, very powerful. And so I did that, and I just did simple exercise, walking my dogs up and down the cul-de-sac every day. They were testing my blood every 3 to 4 days to see what the levels were, because they were so high. They were concerned that my levels could be increasing. And so they were taking the blood and they were seeing that it was going down. So it just started going down and down and down throughout the month when I was taking the drinks and doing the food and meditating. And then at the end of the month, they tested it again and it was down to 0. So nothing, zilch. And they had said it would be at least a full year, if not longer, since my levels were so high, of doing chelation therapy. So I didn't do any chelation therapy, all 100% natural, and then I healed myself. And so from that, I really learned that, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who's got chronic illness. I'm not the only one whose doctors have said there's nothing I can do. Sorry, we've tried everything, or your blood looks fine. I think you're just depressed. That's what they said to me. I think you're depressed. And then it was, oh, I think you're stressed. And then I think you're hypochondriac because nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And then finally they gave me the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. And then they said there's no cure. So I realized that being a woman specifically, we're not really taken seriously by doctors.
Oh, completely. And yeah, I've had the same experience. I went through my own sort of, health crisis, and they're like, you're depressed. Here, take the depression pill.
Yeah,
Like, no,
exactly.
there's definitely something wrong with it. And I,
Exactly.
like you, I had to self-diagnose. And then I went to my doctor, my OBGYN was like, do I have this? And she's like, yes, and then I finally had a diagnosis, and there were other ones too, but that was just my first one. And it just blew my mind how I feel like as women, it's largely dismissed and like, oh, it's emotional, whatever, just kind of carry on and shove it down or whatever.
Exactly. And that's what I learned. I'd never had chronic illness before. And all of a sudden I realized that women specifically, because we have emotions, we're not taken seriously. It's like, no, just listen to us. Just take this medication, suppress it down, or just don't talk about it and it'll be fine. Just accept it. So many people said, oh, you're not as young as you used to be. Just accept how you feel now. And I'm like, no, this is not okay. I'm debilitated. Yeah. I can't work. I can't date. I can't do anything. So yeah, see, again, this shows that this is a really big problem. And so when I realized that, I'm like, I've got to empower women. I've got to empower women so they know the truth, that you can get better. You can get better naturally. It doesn't always have to be a medication or surgery that you do. You can find out the root cause, and that's what I did. I found out the root cause. It was in my liver. It was the heavy metals. Once I got them out, health was restored. All of those symptoms that had been brewing up and getting worse over the years were solved by getting the heavy metals out. So
yeah. This is a huge undiagnosed problem in the United States. I think worldwide, but we do have so many toxins here. It's in the air, it's in the water, think about all the emissions and, factory pollution, everything that's going out into the air, and then we breathe it in. So even if you eat really cleanly and you make sure to drink really good water, whatever, you're getting that in your body just through living, just through breathing every day. And this is not something that's tested regularly, and it should be. And I believe that a lot of issues that people have in terms of, chronic health conditions, actually at its core, a lot of one of the triggering effects or triggering reasons for these health issues is actually toxicity, and specifically heavy metal toxicity. For example, there are certain metals that if you get them, it will trigger diabetes, and this is not discussed. This is not discussed in terms of mainstream medicine anyway. And it's really important. And I also believe right now with this pandemic that we're in, that, a lot of the people that get very sick or die are the ones that have secondary health conditions, one or two comorbidities. And I've gotten the psychic message that there's a lot of people that have issues going on that they're just not aware of. So they're undiagnosed and they don't realize that their immune system is being suppressed because of, for example, these heavy metals.
Yes, I absolutely agree. So that's it. People don't realize their symptoms because they're just trying to push ahead. In our society, it's all about be productive, go faster. Don't think about how you feel, just keep working. Even if you're sick, keep working. So people have symptoms, and that's what happens is that they start off just subtle, because our body does speak with us. It has a language. It wants us to know something's out of balance. And so we may just start with a headache and say, oh, it's just a headache. And then you get an upset stomach. But the more you ignore your symptoms, the worse the symptoms will become. And it's kind of like your
Totally.
body saying, okay, you're still not
Yeah,
listening. Okay, well,
totally.
then we got this problem now. Are you going to pay attention now? And most people don't. Then they go to the doctor, they take medicine, they have it suppressed. So it's not healed. They're just not experiencing it as bad, or maybe it is not really noticeable at all. But then it's creating more side effects with the medication. So if people really value their liver and realize how important their liver is, and it's really the liver that has to take out all the medications, all of the bacteria, all of the toxins, helps us to digest our food, etc. It does so many important functions. If people realized how important their liver is and did liver detoxes and really took good care of themselves, then all these other symptoms wouldn't happen and it wouldn't create these other illnesses.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for us to take charge of our health and not just automatically believe any expert, whether that's a particular doctor or another practitioner or the media or whatever, because I feel like we're given a lot of messages about what's possible and what's not possible. And just like you, I was given certain diagnoses and was basically like, that's, you just have that forever. Like, I've
Mm-hmm.
hypoglycemia and you're just always going to struggle with your blood sugar. And I'm like, no, I've
Mm-hmm.
managed it through my diet and lifestyle and making energetic shifts. So now my blood sugar is normalized. So
Wonderful.
yeah. And I think
Yes.
that's possible with a lot of different things. And I want to bring up another issue because I think this is important, particularly for my podcast listeners. So
Yes.
you identify as an empath, correct?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I do too. And one of the things that I have gotten psychically is that empaths actually absorb everything more than others, including toxins. So
Mm.
empaths can have a very high toxic load when exposed to the same amount of toxins compared to someone who's not an empath. Because we're
Mm.
like sponges, right? We're just like taking everything in. And it is kind of a superpower. There's some really wonderful aspects of that. But if you're around toxins or you're not then able to clear all that stuff out that you take in, you end up basically becoming more and more toxic. So a lot of empaths also end up having, some chronic health conditions
I
because they've not dealt with that underlying issue of the toxins, and then these things just develop over time. So that for me, my sort of health journey and process was very tied in with the recognition of my psychic abilities and being an empath, and the realization that I needed to learn how to clear all this stuff, both
mm.
physical and energy, in order
Mm-hmm.
to feel good and healthy.
That's
So I
that's
think
great
that's really
information. I
interesting.
never
Whenever I
heard that
talk to
before.
Oh yeah, I've just noticed it through patterns, and then I literally got that psychic message of like what empaths are like psychic sponges, and then literally it's
Yes.
toxins as well. So
That
if
makes
you
sense.
yeah, so if you are empathic and you're struggling with health issues, I definitely recommend you checking out your toxicity and heavy metals, because I think that can be the underlying cause of a lot of issues. And it makes sense. These things just gum up your system, basically. They stop your body's ability to heal itself, and then
Yes,
issues develop.
exactly.
And it might
Yeah,
be
because you
different issues for different people, but they're going to be issues, period. Like for me, blood sugar was a big issue.
yeah,
Um,
that's interesting. I was also diagnosed with hypoglycemia as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of heavy metals, they mess up your liver, your pancreas, your pancreas, which
Yeah.
has to do with insulin production, and yeah, it's a really fascinating thing. It's something
That's
that I
okay.
I feel like, maybe in 10 years or something, this is going to start to be really addressed more in terms of sort of mainstream medicine, but it
Yes,
just
I
hasn't
hope
quite yet
so.
there.
I hope so. We need to adapt a more holistic approach, really understand how the organs are working together and how the
Yeah.
whole picture of health, not to just center on some symptoms, but really how are you feeling as well? Because that's also a big component of health. So that's
Oh,
something
huge.
I've seen with my clients, is that a lot of times it starts with the emotions. And again, if we are taught to suppress those emotions, just don't be sad, don't be angry, don't grieve, just keep on going, then your body still absorbs them and it has a muscle memory. And again, the more you ignore something, the more the body's going to keep on trying to show you signs something's not right inside. So a lot of times it starts with emotion, then it gets into the body, and then it gets into chronic illness.
Yeah, and I think this is a really fascinating thing when you look at it from an energetic and, say, for example, a Chinese medicine perspective. I'm not sure, are
Mm.
you very familiar with Chinese medicine and any of the
A little
principles?
bit. I went to acupunctures. Yeah. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
Uh-huh.
cool. Yeah, me too. I love acupuncture. But one of the things I learned from Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, is that each organ has an emotion associated with it.
Absolutely. And that's part of shamanism too.
Okay. I didn't know that about shamanism, but it totally makes sense. I mean, I think so many of these different approaches are just, handling things in a similar way with slightly different terminology.
Yes,
And
yes. But it makes sense. They're both Eastern.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So with the liver, the emotion associated with the liver is anger.
Yes. So if it's imbalance, it's anger. If it's balance, then it's passion.
Okay.
So really going towards your desires and your dreams. Yes.
Okay. So if it's imbalance, and I think that's what's happening right now is all this toxicity. People are angry.
People are
angry right now, and we're seeing that. And a lot of times there is reason to be angry. I'm not saying there isn't. We're seeing all these protests and everything, but
you should express yourself. Yes.
Yes, but it's been suppressed, right? Which creates anger and congestion in the liver. And now it's like, okay, it's too much. It's got to come out. It's coming out.
Yes.
And I've also noticed for myself that when I struggle with being angry, or I would say easily triggered with anger, where logically I'm like, why am I so angry? Like, this is silly. I shouldn't be this like worked up over whatever, something silly someone said on social media or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, time to detox. Like, it's like, it's like an indicator for me. So I just want to share that because I feel like this is, again, something that we're not kind of taught to look at, but it's really significant that if you're frustrated, easily angered, having a hard time letting go of anger, probably time to do a detox and focus on your liver.
I think that's great advice. And I think that's so important specifically for empaths to know, again, that we do absorb everything. We absorb other people's emotions, other people's pain. So we can even absorb somebody else's physical pain, such as somebody has a backache, we can suddenly have a backache. Or all of a sudden we're like, oh, I've got bad indigestion, or oh, I've got, a bad tummy. So it's very important for people to know that we need to protect ourselves because we are like sponges. And I think that's also what happened early on with my chronic illness was I didn't know that I was an empath. I didn't know how sensitive I was. I didn't know I was picking up other people's energy. So I actually even got a parasite as well. So that's another indication that I'm allowing people to, steal my energy, to take it away. Like I'm giving it to someone else. They are gaining the energy, but I am losing my vitality and energy. So I think it's very, very important for empaths to learn different protection techniques. And also, like you said, to definitely detoxify your liver. Everyone should detoxify their liver, especially, as you said, empaths, since we are absorbing so much. And since you mentioned that we are more sensitive to absorb more than other people would, taking the same amount. But everyone, especially with the coronavirus, should also be doing a liver detox. This is very important. This is something that's not being talked about at all. So I really recommend everyone be proactive about their health. So I'm very big about saying, okay, we have to be our own health advocates. We have to be, the one who values our health more than anyone else, because no one else is going to do that. We assume doctors have the best interests. We assume that they are going to make us better and the best us possible. But really, we have to be our own health advocates. We have to do the research. We have to take the steps to continue to make sure we are healthy, to maintain our health. It's up to us. It really is up to us.
I completely agree. We need to empower ourselves and know that amazing, incredible, sort of miraculous healings are possible. I really believe that.
Yes.
That almost whatever we have been told, we can make some amazing shifts.
Yeah, and we can empower ourselves. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was just going to say, I'm glad you brought up the issue of parasites, because I think this is another sort of hidden epidemic in the country. And there is a fair amount of evidence out there when in talking to holistic health practitioners to tie heavy metal toxicity with parasites. So if you have heavy metal toxicity, you often have parasites as well, and vice versa.
Yes.
They tend to go hand in hand. And I believe a lot of empaths also struggle with parasites. And this is another situation where it's frequently not diagnosed by mainstream medicine. So
yes. That goes back to, I'm sorry, again, that goes back to being an empath and picking up energy, because it's like picking up the energy of a psychic vampire. That's what a
Yeah.
parasite is. So really they're leeching your energy, and just like a psychic vampire who is in person, but you may not really know the effect they're having energetically with you. And so this is a sign. If you get parasites, you probably have some toxic people around you, people who are
Totally.
just trying to take your energy instead of have a nice reciprocal relationship.
Absolutely. Like, it's not a symbiotic relationship. It's like a one-way kind of giving
Yeah,
relationship. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So they gain
absolutely,
power. Yeah.
if you have parasites, then you probably are in kind of parasitic relationships in one form
Yes,
or
yes,
another. But
yes.
I was shocked, like for me, and by the way, I've had a couple interviews on this podcast with parasite experts, Dr.
Oh,
Todd Watts
really?
included. Yeah, so
Wonderful.
definitely recommend checking that out. But that was my journey where I was feeling like, okay, I've gone through this healing journey, but I still don't have the energy that I should have, not quite where I want to be. And I had been to so many different practitioners, doctors and
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, and it never in my mind like, oh, I have parasites. And then
Yeah.
I talked with this parasite expert, and we started talking about some kind of like unusual, I would say minor symptoms that I was experiencing. I was like, I think I have those. And then I tried the parasite supplements, and I was blown away by how bad my parasites were. Once I
Oh,
started taking the supplements, I had evidence like, oh yeah, I have really bad
yeah.
parasites. And so I'm
Yeah.
just sharing this because I feel like a lot of people have them and have no idea, because it's not tested
Yes.
for unless you've been in a country where it's known to have serious parasite issues, or you start to have major gastrointestinal distress. But I didn't have those things. Like and based on what I eliminated, I had to have parasites for decades. Like it was
Wow.
bad. And so I'm curious,
Wow.
like what got you to know that you had parasites? Because I think, again, a lot of people have no idea.
Well, I think it's very interesting what you said. It's like the stigma. It's like the United States has this
Yeah.
impression of itself that we can't have parasites, we can't have
Yes.
heavy metals. We're like above all these other things because we're, a first world country. But it's true, you can get parasites even here in the United States. So
Yes.
for me, I actually started to get sick when I was living abroad. So I was living in London for my junior year abroad, had a fabulous time, but I got really sick while I was there. So I knew right away when my health started to change, because again, I'd been healthy all of my life. So all of a sudden I got, really bad upset stomach. I had bad fever, couldn't get over it. And so to make a long story short, I was still having problems when I went back home to the States. So I knew something was wrong. They did test for it, and they did find out that it was a parasite. But again, they said it was a controversial parasite, and they said some people, they don't have any symptoms. Some people, they do have symptoms. And some people, they take medicine for it. And some people, they just let it run its course, and eventually it will go away. So I definitely did have symptoms. All of a sudden, I became lactose intolerant, and I couldn't handle dairy anymore. Really bad upset stomach, diarrhea. I can't remember if it was a combination of constipation and diarrhea, but anyway, it was clear that something was wrong. I really didn't feel well. So it was confirmed that I had the parasite, but then they didn't know how to treat it, which is so ridiculous, because it's like, come on, don't you know
Mm-hmm.
how to treat a parasite? So before then, this was my senior year when I was diagnosed, but before then I did my junior abroad in London, and then I went traveling around Europe, and then I went into Africa. So I was very, very sick when I was in Africa, but I thought, okay, I was just really sick while I was there. Then afterwards I got better, but still was never quite 100%. But, parasites, they hold on tight.
They do.
So
And
I
they
was,
can go in cycles where you kind of maybe clear some out and then another set release or whatever, and you'll get sicker. So it can come in waves in terms of how you feel.
yeah, yeah. And they can, breed and then cause more. So what happened to me is they gave me some medicine. Um, Such a long time ago. They gave me some medicine. I think it worked for a week, but it was so strong they said you could only take it for a week and not longer. But then after that, my symptoms just continued. So I said, can I take it a little bit longer? It's not gone yet. And so I took it a little longer, and then I became delirious. I was like, I was like drugged out. And I was like, okay, I got to get off of this. This isn't working. I can't go to school and go to classes like this. So anyway, they put me on antibiotics for 2.5 years to get rid of the parasites. And you don't give antibiotics for a parasite. It doesn't kill off parasites. So they're giving me the
No.
wrong medicine for 2.5 years. It completely like wrecked my gut, and developed all these other symptoms. And I didn't find out until later I should have been taking different medicine, and they gave me the wrong medicine. So, again, we have to be proactive. We have to do the research on our own. We can't always assume that they're giving us the right treatment. So it's very difficult, but we must do our own research, even though people think that doctors have all this schooling, they're the experts, but a lot of times they make mistakes too.
Oh, completely. And they know about their area. With our system of medicine, they're very specialized in one area, but they may not know
Yeah,
about how that impacts something else. And it's
yeah.
constantly learning too. We're all constantly learning. Another thing I'm just getting intuitively to bring up is if you do have food sensitivities or allergies, and a lot of them, that a lot of times parasites can contribute to that.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned all of a sudden you were sensitive to dairy. Like I've had a lot of food intolerances and allergies, and as I've cleared up my system from parasites, heavy metal toxicity, my food sensitivities have become lessened.
Yes,
So I
yes,
just
it's
really
amazing.
want to stress that, because I think that's not something that a lot of people are looking at. And I've only noticed it through sort of association, like, oh, as I shifted this, suddenly I could eat a little bit. I could eat eggs again. For a while, if I ate eggs, I would get so sick. So
Yeah, I
it's
was
just,
allergic to everything for a while. I was allergic to eggs, I was allergic to soy, dairy, gluten, but at first I wasn't sure if it was wheat or gluten, so it took me a really long time to figure it out. But now I can have gluten, but it's interesting. It's just when I go to Europe and other countries that have, stricter regulations on grains, I'm fine. But here in the United States, since we still have a lot of pesticides on our
yeah.
grains, I get sick. I can't eat anything here. So it's really the pesticides now that are the problem, not the actual gluten. So again, I think a lot of people aren't aware of that too. It could be the pesticides that they spray on the wheat, on the grains that are making you sick, not that you are gluten intolerant.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly complicated. And of course, everyone's different in terms of how they react.
Yeah.
But if you clear out parasites, toxins,
Hmm.
then a lot of times these other dietary sensitivities will at least improve. Sometimes they may not completely go away, but they're definitely going to lessen. And even lessening a reaction, I think
Yes,
is a
yes,
really good thing. So yeah, and
absolutely. Better quality of life.
yeah, and I feel like I'm still healing that, but I think you're right that parasites are definitely sort of stigmatized, and I think they shouldn't be. Like, this is just a real thing. And the idea that they're not here in the United States is false. They are definitely here in the United States. They can be in
Hmm.
tap water, it can be on food.
Sushi.
Yeah, sushi, and it can even be on vegetables because of how they're fertilized. So,
Hmm.
even if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you could still get sort of meat-borne parasites because of fertilization. So just,
Yeah.
want everyone to know that this is not something to feel stigmatized about. It's very natural. And there's, this idea of like, to a degree, if we're alive, we're going to have some kind of something in our system,
Yes, yes.
that's probably parasitic, but we definitely don't want that to be the majority of what's going on, because that's when we get drained, chronic disease, just
Hmm.
and aging of the cells, because our body is trying so hard just to fight all this stuff
Mm.
that we stop to do the work on the mitochondria, and our cells start to age, and that's when we start to have age-related decline. At least that's
Hmm.
a big contributor from what I
Absolutely.
feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
So I
it's just
know,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry,
Yeah,
there's a bit of a delay.
it's just too bad that most doctors here don't have a holistic approach, because if they understood how everything is connected, if they understood to really get to the root cause, if they understood to really focus on when the symptoms started, when the illness started, then so much would be improved. People wouldn't have to have these long illnesses, and we wouldn't have to hear all the time that there's no cure or you have to accept it. But all this terminology has just gotten passed down by doctors, so people really believe it. They really believe if they have certain illnesses that they can't get better, that they have to accept it, that there is no cure. They're always looking for the cure, but I think that's an unfortunate word that they use. It's kind of like saying it's a magical spell that you're going to find. It's not, magic. We just have to take steps and take consistent steps for our health. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I know one of the things that you're also really passionate about is women's health and
Yeah.
childbirth. So tell us about your book. I think it's going to be an amazing book. I'm excited for
Oh,
it.
thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited about it too. So I actually started writing this book last year. I started writing it last July, and it was completely inspired. I never planned to write a book about childbirth or about childbirth around the world. I just started to get all these signs, and I became very curious. And I realized that we're in this age of female empowerment, and yet there is this subject that women are not talking about openly. They're not really talking about the full story of what they have experienced being a mother, being pregnant, the childbirth experience, and even postpartum. So there's still a lot of secrecy, there's still a lot of shame. And that's something that was really surprising for me when I started researching this book, because I started interviewing women. I interviewed over 60 mothers all around the world. And right from the beginning, I heard that women were feeling shamed. They were feeling shamed from other women. And they were also shaming themselves based on society and based on standards they felt from society of what was expected from them. And I was just floored. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're doing one of the most miraculous feats ever. And yet you're feeling shame, you're feeling guilt, you're feeling like you have to keep this a secret. And yet there's this side of some women who do share their experiences with their friends, and they feel like, oh no, we share everything. But what I found is that that's not true, because as you probably know, if you have shame, you don't talk about it openly,
Yeah.
right? You want to keep it secret because there's something that you feel is so bad that you would feel like you would die if you had to share it with somebody else. And so that's what this book is really exposing, like the truth. All women all around the world, all different experiences. I didn't limit it to just home births or hospital births or birthing center births or natural childbirth or with medicine. I said, tell me all your stories. Tell me everything. And then the truth came out, and women were very, very candid, very open. And some of them, it was the first time they'd ever shared the whole story before. Some of them, it was the first time they'd shared the story without crying. Some of them, it was the first time that they'd really seen how much they have transformed and how much they've grown through their motherhood. So it's just really beautiful, really amazing. So really beautiful stories. And I've decided it's going to be a 2-book series because I had so many fabulous interviews and want to share as many stories as possible. And I also did interview some childbirth experts as well. So I interviewed an OBGYN from Peru. I interviewed a few midwives, a nurse, childbirth expert, all sorts of different professions. So I think that really gives a really rich view from a lot of different angles.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is so important. And I think you're right. Women are taught that it's not okay to talk about our bodies. I mean, one of the things, I mean, we can barely even talk about periods. And, it's like, come on,
It's
like,
true.
this is just a natural thing. Like, this
I
shouldn't be a
know.
shame. This is a sign that things are functioning in our body. Like, it's
Yes.
normal. And it's not dirty. It's just the normal part of life. So I think we're going through a big shift as a society and as a people of these things that have been previously been suppressed and kind of like, we don't talk about it. So whether that's women's bodies, childbirth, racism, all of these things are coming up to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I think
Yes.
it's so, so important. And I just want to share, I was with my cousin when she gave birth, and she did
Oh.
in a hospital. And I was really, this is my first like in hospital experience and the first experience being around someone during the birth process. I was just really disappointed in, I guess, how clinical it all felt.
Yeah, it's
And
become very clinical.
and as a psychic medium, I was like, where's the spiritual aspect? Where's the recognition of the importance of there is a person, a soul coming into this life, and
Yeah, into the
that
world.
it's something remarkable. And of course, we need to be safe and do all the things, but I felt like it was just so lopsided in terms of just focusing on just one part of this whole picture. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's happening in society as a whole, where we've just been very analytical, focusing on the physical, focusing on the medical. And now we're like, well, wait a minute. What about the soul? What about the spirit? What about the emotions? So
Yeah,
whether that's to do with
exactly.
illness or childbirth or whatever, we have to address that.
Exactly. It used to be such a very natural process that women did together, no doctors involved, just mothers helping their daughters, grandmothers coming in, perhaps a midwife. And it was a very special time, very bonding time. And then, then it moved to the hospitals, and then the hospitals had completely changed because doctors really wanted more control. Then there was the fear of safety. There was a fear of being sued. So a lot of all of these rules, all these waivers you have to sign is really because doctors, hospitals are afraid of being sued. And also it's about being as efficient as possible, like really having that time limit. So you go into a hospital and you're on the clock. You have a time limit. So you have to really know what it is for that hospital. Some it's 24 hours. If you don't give birth within 24 hours, then you have to have a C-section. For some, it's 8 hours. It really depends.
Wow, 8 hours.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So you really have to know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My cousin was in labor for 36 hours and then they ended up doing a C-section. I was like, oh, it was just like the worst of both worlds, like a long labor and then also a C-section.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And so women go through a lot emotionally, as you said, so they need to be supported emotionally. It's very important.
That's what really struck me is like, oh, I just felt the lack of that aspect, and the medical part is important. I
yes,
I
of course.
understand
Safety is important.
We want everyone to survive, and among
yes,
everything,
we
but
do.
like I feel like there can be this bridge between the two where we're both are being addressed in a better way, and that's I think it's great your book to help shed light on different options and what's really going on, because I think you're right, most women don't talk about this, and then the first time they learn is when they're actually going through it themselves, and then it's too late to implement some of these things.
So that's what I want my book to do, is to really empower women, to educate them, to inspire them, but to empower them, because I think that's what's happened for a lot of women is that they give birth and it's just the act of giving birth, but it's not an empowering experience. And it used to be really, woman was like, wow, okay, I'm so amazing. I'm so strong. I did this. This is great. And I'm here with my ladies. We're all supporting each other. But now women have become disempowered through the experience because a lot of times they're not even giving informed consent. They don't understand what medicines they're being given. They don't understand what technology is being asked for them to do.
Right.
So really they're giving their power away at this time where they are so vulnerable. They're most vulnerable. So it's really, I hope this book will help the conversation so other women can feel that they can speak up no matter what their experience is. There's no right or wrong, but it's very important to have this conversation so that women have an understanding, so that they know, because so many women, like you said, they don't know anything that happens until they give birth or until they take the baby home. A lot of people say, I never thought about what it's going to be like once I'm home. Or I never knew what postpartum depression was like. I heard of it, but once I had it, I didn't even know I had it because I was so in the moment of just survival.
Yeah.
So I think this book will hopefully empower women so that they can speak up, but also so if they choose to have a baby, if they haven't had a child yet, they can have an empowered birth.
I think this is so great. And I'd like to transition to talking about another thing that I think has also been suppressed, just like we're talking about, things, I think anything that we're ashamed of that has this intense energy, I think is really coming to the surface now to be addressed.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing this now with our society, with all these things that are like, a lot of people like, I didn't know that was going on, or that's
yes, no. I know. It's all the surprises. I didn't know.
Yeah, and it can be a shock, but also I feel like this is an important part of the process of bringing things to light so that we can clear through them, process them, and be in a better place as a whole. And one of those things that's coming up really strongly right now is racism in our society and institutional racism and hidden racism. So I'd love if you could just share a little bit about your story. You did a Facebook post that actually inspired me to reach out about this. And just share your story, your thoughts on feelings on some of what's happening right now.
Okay, great. I'm curious which Facebook post it was, which story that I shared. Do you remember?
I think it was where you talked about, I think it was when you were studying abroad, but you basically that people didn't know that you are Black, that you're a fair-skinned Black woman, and basically were saying racist comments to you.
Exactly. Okay, I'll tell that story then. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you mentioned, I'm very light-skinned African American, and I grew up in a very affluent community, so very rich, and I was only one of 2 African Americans in the whole town. So there was another family that was Jamaican, and they were actually considered cool because they were from the islands, but my family was just African American, so not considered cool. And some people knew that my family was African American. They could tell, and other people just didn't know because I was so fair-skinned. I'm the lightest of my family, but they couldn't tell with them either because they looked tan instead of dark-skinned. So I grew up with people saying things because they thought no one was around. You know, they didn't think there were any minorities around. They could say whatever. So I remember being on the school bus and there was this kid saying how much he hated Blacks. And I was just in my seat just hearing this and I was like cringing. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. And then there was a neighbor of mine who was a friend of his and he said, cut it out, you know, Khristee's on the bus, you know, shut up. And the guy's like, what? You know, she's not Black. What are you talking about? It's like, yes, she is. So he had no idea. He just had no idea. And then, as you mentioned, I went to study abroad in London. And when I was there, I met someone who had never been around African Americans. He was from another country. We had become friends because we were both in the theater department together. And he just said one day that he hated Blacks. And I was again like, what are you talking about? You're talking to somebody who's African American. How can you say that to me? And he was just like, what? No, you're not Black, you're white. He was like arguing to me about my own race. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. And so I had to like talk him through and to try to understand why he believed that. Because obviously he liked me as a person. You know, that wasn't the problem, but it was just my race. It was just knowing that I was Black. And so I had to say, well, where did this come from? You know, why do you hate Blacks? And he's like, oh, I hate them. You just know because, you know, they're savages and they're rapists and they're so violent and they have guns and they're criminals, they're bad people. And I'm like, what gives you this idea? If you've never been to the US, you've never been around Black people, it sounds. So why do you believe this? And he said, oh, well, I watched the movies. I watched lots of American movies. And I went,
my gosh.
oh, good Lord, our own country is spreading racism around the world, not just in our own country, but around the world. And people learn from us. They learn from our movies. Some people never get a chance to come to the United States. So that's how they learn about who we are. So it really made me think about our society. It really made me think about what lessons we are teaching. And I realized that, you know, our entertainment is a big culprit. You know, we really do have a lot of movies with a lot of gratuitous violence. And I know you're an empath too, and I just can't take all this violence. I'm just always closing my eyes and saying, okay, when is it over? But most people have become desensitized to it, and they really enjoy the action because they need some excitement in their life. And they have, you know, unconsciously believed whatever the movie is saying, that, okay, yes, African Americans, they are in gangs and they are always in the prison system. So they're criminals and rapists and all these terrible things. But it's not true. It's not a full picture of who we are. So I believe this is, it's a very deep problem. So I believe that this is happening for a reason. Like you mentioned, that we are becoming aware of it. It's like finally time. We've been, again, going through tunnel vision for so long, just working on ourselves, just getting through, making the money, having the life that we're supposed to have, get married and have, you know, 2 kids and have a dog and have a car, all these things that we're just driven to do, but not realize and open our eyes to what's going on in the world. So now it's a time for us to really like peel back the curtain, see what's happening and see how deep it is. And I think that's what people don't realize, is that it goes deep. It's not just all the shootings that have been happening over the last several years. It's really how our country was actually formed. You know, our country was formed on racism. Yeah, absolutely. It was formed on abuse of power. And a lot of people say, okay, well, that's right. That's because they brought the slaves over from Africa. That's definitely racist, not respecting them and saying, okay, here, come with me and do all the labor I want for free. But it even started before then. It started, you know, with Christopher Columbus coming over and saying that he had discovered America, right? He had discovered this new land when there were people already living here. The Native Americans were here. but they completely took over their land. And now all of them are in reservations in the poorest places in the United States and in Canada. And so that was the beginning of racism, what we did to the Native American people. And a lot of people aren't even thinking about that right now.
Yeah.
So we need to heal the formation of this country, okay? How it was started. And of course, we need to heal slavery. That is a huge, huge topic we need to heal for African Americans, because if you understand trauma, trauma is not only individual, what we personally experience, but there's intergenerational trauma that's passed down from generation to generation. And trauma, you know, similar to illness, if we don't heal it, if we keep on suppressing it, it stays in the body. It stays in the muscle memory. And what happens is it doesn't end when you die. So when you pass on, but if you have a child, that trauma goes to them too, even if they haven't personally experienced the trauma. So we have some deep work to do in this country to really heal all the layers of individual trauma, but also collective trauma that's been passed down generation by generation by generation.
I completely agree with you. And I think a lot of this is been hidden from the mainstream, and we have a lot of whitewashing in terms of the history and like what actually happened, glorifying, you know, people that were doing very bad things, and we still have them in the history books as these like, you know,
Christopher Columbus.
Very
Columbus
Christopher
Day.
Columbus is one. A lot of the sort of founding fathers of the country as well that were doing these very bad things with, you know, basically having women as not just slaves, but like sex slaves, and then, you know, forcing them to have their children, and then they're legally their property. I mean, this is just appalling. And this needs to be addressed, I think, in our educational system. So that people really see things clearly for what they were. And you're totally right about Native Americans. Like that was the first, you know, kind of racism. And then this is still not addressed. Like we still have issues with Native people's rights here, Native Americans' rights not being honored.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
How they took over their sacred land, everything with Mount Rushmore, that was their sacred
treaties
mountain.
Still not being honored from, you know, now over centuries ago. Yeah, it's a huge issue. And I think part of what's happening now, and I think this is good that it's being brought to light, even though it's very painful for a lot of, let's say, white people that have been very insulated from a lot of this, and they haven't experienced it firsthand. And it's now coming as a shock. And I think there's also a feeling like this cognitive dissonance, like almost like this couldn't be that bad, like, because it's so horrifying. You know, where it's like, this is so horrible, like almost like this denial of like, no, that's so ugly, I can't face it. And I feel like, no, this is the most important thing that we need to face right now. Because if we just don't face it, if we just ignore it or deny it, it just festers, just like what you're talking about.
Just like an illness.
So I guess I'd love to hear any suggestions or tips that you have for how can we be more engaged? How can we be supportive and really help to shift this, each of us individually?
So very good question. So I have lots of advice. One, we need to start with ourselves. Okay, you got to start with yourself, and you've got to really assess yourself. So if you have trauma that you haven't healed in your life, you need to heal that first. So before you can help anybody else, you always need to fill up your cup. You always need to heal yourself first. So look back. If you have some childhood trauma that you haven't healed, you must heal that first. And then you've got to take the good self-care. You've got to really ground yourself, okay? Because it's not a time to be reactionary. It's not a time to really just get really angry and let it all out on Facebook and shame and blame people, which I see a lot of this happening right now. That's not going to end racism in this country. Instead, it's very important for us to be grounded in our truth, to really be able to think clearly about how we feel. It is important to express ourselves and to voice our voice. Very, very important. But I know a lot of people, like you said, they have been secluded. They haven't been, you know, aware of everything that's happening. And this is really overwhelming for them. So I think for them, the great action is to listen. And a lot of people don't think that listening is an action, but listening is a very important step in this discussion, very important step in this healing. Because when you listen, then you can develop an understanding. But if you're not willing to be open and to listen and to only tell people what to do or tell people how to act, then that's not a conversation. That's not a discussion. That's very one way, and you're not learning anything. So I really encourage those who do not know what to say or what to do at this time to listen, because there are leaders out there. There are African Americans who do know the history, who do understand the pain and the suffering, who do understand how this is deep and how it is systemic, okay? How it really is the prison system, how the high percentage of African Americans in prison, okay, versus whites for the same crimes. African Americans are always put in jail, but people who are white, they go off scot-free. So it's in so many different organizations, and it needs to be healed, and trauma needs to be healed too. So what I really wish is that if people can help, if they are mental health professionals, that they donate some free time. You know, lawyers do some pro bono work. If some mental health professionals got out there and said, okay, well, I see that I can offer, you know, an hour a week or whatever it is. And if other people do that too, we can help so many people. So they could go and they could talk to, you know, African Americans who have had trauma and just offer them some free counseling. Or they could talk to, you know, police officers and really make sure that their mental health is balanced, okay? So I think that that needs to be criteria, that we can't just allow anybody to be a cop. You know, they should really be checked to see if they have any trauma, if they have any bias against anyone, African Americans, women, elderly, anyone, Hispanics. And if they do, they shouldn't be allowed on the force. So we really need to make sure that, one, we're doing a better job of vetting, but also to make sure that cops have a chance to express how they're feeling. They are going through trauma. Okay, they see some terrible things that some of us will never see in our day-to-day life. But if they have somebody to talk to and to see if they are fit to continue on the field after that, then that could really make a huge impact if somebody is, you know, unfairly racially profiled out in public, you know? So there's so many different things we can do, but we have to be strategic. So it's not about taking quick action, but it's really getting grounded, getting into our heart and saying, okay, what can I do? Can I just listen right now to those who are leaders and hear what they say? And if something clicks, then I can follow their steps. Or am I a mental health professional? Can I offer some free time to somebody who needs healing? Or can I offer a way to change the police system so that really it is more balanced, so they're accepting of all people, so they have an education beforehand about not bullying? Okay, we really need to realize this is a problem with abuse of power too. It's not just racism. So again, as I said, this goes deep. So if we really teach people it's not okay to bully and have that be part of our day-to-day culture, even going into schools and letting them know it's not okay, then I think this will stop. But right now, there's so many people who have had trauma, hasn't been healed, and they're on Facebook and they're just spurting out anger because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I think it's a really important time to be compassionate,
Yes.
excuse me, and try not to be reactive, even though I know it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think the point you brought up
Yes.
about listening is so important right now. Like, I feel like a lot of times we feel like we have to say something, and sometimes the most powerful thing we can do, like you said, is listen and also assess. And I think we have to do this major rewriting of the narrative of our country and what our country is. Because, for example, we're taught it's the land of the free. And it's really been like the land of the free for some people is, I think, what we really need to recognize.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
Not for
That,
everybody.
like,
Still not
like
free for everyone.
no,
Yes.
no.
Yeah.
And a lot of people also don't understand, you know, when we quote unquote abolished slavery, what ended up happening was the police were, that the police ended up basically just finding laws that people were quote unquote breaking to basically get them into prison labor to work for free as they had in slavery. We still have that to this day, where people that are in prison are paid like 10 cents an hour or something.
It's crazy.
And even these large corporations are paying for basically free prison labor. And as you mentioned, the incarceration rate for non-whites, in particular Black people, is so much higher than,
So
you know,
much higher,
white
like 3
people.
times higher. Yeah, it's
And for the
crazy.
same crimes, and you know, I feel like we can call ourselves the land of the free when we are truly, when this is more equal.
Exactly,
Because
exactly. That's what I was thinking on the 4th of July. We are not
yeah,
free. We are not free. We got to
yeah.
be careful what we're celebrating because then we don't take action.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also as you mentioned, this really goes back to the founding of the country. I mean, the only one founding member, as I understand it, Alexander Hamilton, was against slavery. Everyone else was a pro-slavery, you know, proponent, and
Yeah, it's
had lots
crazy.
of slaves, and it was tied in with the economics. And we need to rewrite our history books because it's not
We
right to
do.
glorify that.
We do. Yeah. And for African American to be considered 3/5 of a person, that's crazy. Three
Yeah,
person. That's so dehumanizing.
yeah. So I encourage everyone to listen, and also
Have empathy, I think, is so important.
have
What you said, have
empathy,
empathy. That's what we need. And to
and also
unify. We should all be trying to unify now, not be divided. That's really important because people are so divided right now, but that's not the point. So with everything going on with the coronavirus, with Black Lives Matter, with so many different issues right now, it is kind of a test, okay? It's really a test to say, okay, are you going to let this divide you or finally unify you? And I
yeah.
believe this is a time of spiritual awakening when we can ascend, when we can grow spiritually. We can learn so much because the veil has been lifted and now we
Hmm.
see the truth. But we need to unify. It's so important for us to have that be our intention so that we can do this together.
I think that's a wonderful point, and I think we're also coming into an age of recognizing our own personal power.
Yes,
And society teaches us messages that we are disempowered, that we're weak, we can't make a
I
difference.
know.
And
Yes.
that's wrong. And I know you believe that too. And we can make a difference in this way too. And I want to encourage everyone to use their voice in a positive way, but also to stand up when things are not just. Because I think one of
Yes.
the reasons a lot of these things have been allowed to happen for so long is because the perpetrators of some of these intense actions are not being called out. They're not being
Yes.
called out by their, you know, co-police officers that maybe don't believe that, but they're not speaking up. You know, other white people seeing someone do a racist act and they're not standing up and saying something. And we all need to be advocates for our fellow people, regardless of what they look like. And you know, I'm sure you believe this
Yes.
too, but as a spiritual person who believes in reincarnation, like,
I
yes,
was just about to say that. Yes, we've
yeah, like,
been all races in different lifetimes. We're a
exactly.
spirit. We're not really a race. Our spirit is not a race. So we really must unify and just stop looking at color, stop
Yes.
dividing ourselves again.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the significance of, you know, how whatever we were born into, and all of
Our
our
ancestry is
experiences
important.
and our
Yeah.
ancestry and our personal experiences based on what we look like, but at the same time to recognize that we are all people and we're going through this collective experience. And the sooner I think we recognize that, then the sooner a lot of these things will shift, because you know, so much of this material world could be thought of as like an illusion. It's not, you know, you are not
Yes.
just what you look like now, as I am not just what I look like now. It's just a very small part of who we
Yes.
are on a soul level.
I agree. Absolutely. Well said. It's just an illusion. We have to open our eyes. Beautiful. Yes.
And that's not to minimize the importance of where we are right now and what we look like. And we have been put in this sort of package, you know, of what we look like and what we're born into for a reason. So there is significance, but it's not our true
Yes.
soul identity, I guess is the way I'd say that.
Exactly. Yes. Very well said. Yeah.
Well, thank
Great.
you, Khristee. This has been so amazing. I think I knew when we started, we are going to talk about a lot of different things because, you know, health and
I don't think we've
childbirth
covered it.
and you
Yes.
know, race. It's awesome. And I know you have so much to offer.
Empowerment, health. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So is there anything you'd like to share that we haven't touched on today?
I did want to share, if anybody's interested in trying a session with me, I do offer one-on-one sessions, and I also do offer group healing sessions. So with both of those, they do include a clairvoyant intuitive reading. And if anyone is a mother who is listening, I actually do have a survey for my book. I am collecting statistics from my book to help to empower other mothers. So if you fill out a survey, then you have a chance to win a complimentary one-on-one healing with me or a group healing with me. So I'm giving out one-on-one 90-minute session with me. That's a value of $150. And I'm also giving out 5 group healings. So those are a value of $45 each. So if anyone's interested in filling that out to help with the book to empower women, they can go to my website. It's www.thedancingcurtain.com. And it's right on that homepage. Just look for the button that says Take Survey. Click on that. You fill it out and it'll go directly to me and you will be entered in the drawing.
Amazing. Well, that's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing everything that you're working on. And it's been really a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been great. Thank you so much.
And thank you everybody for listening. If you'd like more information about me on the psychic realm, you can go to healingpowers.net. On the sort of creative side, go to laurapowers.net. And you can always find me at Twitter at @LauraPowers, Instagram at LauraPowers44, and on Facebook. And Khristee, it's just occurring to me, we didn't also mention very much, but you all, we have a similar background because you did acting and have been an actress, and I have as well. And I just think that's really fun that when you're creative, you're often sort of psychic and empathic, and vice versa.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I love that we have that background too. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, and have a beautiful rest of your day.